Welcome, everyone, to Sicily. This is the Mondelo Water Festival, and you're watching a really great women's field launch off the beach for the beginning of their race. Some great names in this one, including Mary Carmen Riviera, Melanie Lafenetra, Juliette Duhaime, and Suzette Molinaro. Incredible group of women, and they had a pretty sporty race, but the men's field was absolutely stacked. All sorts of names, many winners from past big races. Reemergence of Tituan Puyo enough was probably going to make this one worth watching. You can see Shuri Araki gets an amazing start right out of the gate. A lot of really fast paddlers out there. We get to the first buoy, those two in front, Iri Tenorio, Shuri Araki, and right there you can see Tituan Puyo. And there's a little bit of a bobble here, but it begins to mix things up. A lot of wave action there as they're going around that buoy. And from there, the race is just back and forth. We'll follow them through. But you can see the texture on the water. You would think this would favor folks like Shuri and T2. And boy, watching this did not disappoint. But look at this. This is kilometers later. And I believe that's David Alpino leading out in front. But the field is just so tight, packed together. Some of the biggest names, I mean, the folks you don't see up front include Tituan and Michael Booth, for example. So a really incredible pack here. They're all stitched together pretty well. Very long draft train. Never really cleaned up. These guys were sort of spread 3, 4, sometimes 5 boards apart. All great paddlers. The name's too many to go through, but there you go. Look, there's Tituan back there. Look at this draft train, and look at that backdrop of Sicily. Unbelievable. The field begins to spread out in this downwind leg. Now, while this is all happening, Marie Carmen Riviera is just walking away with the women's effort. Just look at that. All alone out there, hammering home. Really impressive performance by her. She won that with a couple minutes. Here's the race for second, third, fourth. Some really great names. Juliette Duhaime, Melanie Lafenetra, Suzette Molinaro, I believe, there. Strong women giving chase, but Rivera was just too much on the day. Really impressive performance. Now, speaking of impressive, here is Rai Taguchi gapping the field out front. And watch as Shuri Araki, fellow Japanese paddler, just closes the gap. I just jumped forward like 30 seconds so you could see it. It just drags the field back to Rai, who had essentially broken. And Shuri, who had been leading previously, we stepped away from coverage and you couldn't see exactly what happened, but Rai had walked away. Shuri reels him back in, and here you go. Here's the chase pack. Just crazy amount of talent still there. Watch this buoy. I mean, we are talking about, 6, 7, maybe even 8K into this race. And as we get to the next buoy, there's some chaos. 2 of those heads you see in the water are swimmers, photographers. But some folks go in. There's some carnage, and the race breaks open. I think that Shrimpy probably senses this because from here, he asserts control. But you can see there's a traffic jam, and a couple paddlers walk away. Now, here's what's interesting. You'll see there's Donato Freens up front. He had a tough start if you go back and watch the beginning. He was one of the folks who got sort of pinched out. And here he is at the head of the race with Shuri, and he's on that brand new Ever Ready. And we're going to actually be talking with Dave Bainey in the second part of this podcast about that board and that paddler, in fact. But look at Shuri. Just you cannot get away from that guy. And there's Rai hanging tough, and Ludovic Tellulai. And there's Iri Tenorio, David Alpino. I mean, it is a stacked field. And once again, you look back, and I mean, the back markers here are now the likes of Boothie and T2, which is just insane. Boothie, of course, had just paddled in Carolina and flown over, so give him some grace. And look, there's Shrimpy just walking away with it now as we rejoin. And here he is coming to the beach. I mean, you've got it by distance when you kind of coast in, pick your board up, and walk it to wherever you're going to stash it. Now watch here, though. Turn around. Look how tight the field was. Our female winner you can see right there. That's Marie Carmen Rivera again coming in. Kudos to her. She also crushed her field. But look at this race for second, third, fourth, fifth. By the way, 8,000 euros was the total purse for this. So Shuri bagged 2,000, and it wasn't chump change if you came in second or third. And who came in second and third? Well, it was David Liao and Donato Freens. Great field, great event. This was probably the most stacked field we have seen in years and years that wasn't a World Championship event. Just kudos to the Euro Tour for putting on another great race. Let's talk a little bit more now. We're going to be joined by Dave Bainey, who had a bunch of races, as we discussed in Otto Friens, and Juliet Duheim, who placed really well in these races. And looking forward to hearing about his new board and his paddlers and a lot of other fun conversation. Let's do it. Matt, we're joined by a delightful guest. Everyone probably already recognizes him, Dave Bainey. Dave, thanks for making the time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, you guys. Good to catch up with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been trying to angle for this for a few weeks, but the timing's really good. There's a lot going on right now. First things first, for folks who watch the podcast, and thanks for doing so. The last one was featured some aggressive and smart racing by the one and only Dave Bainey. I'm curious for your thoughts having seen that last pod. If you haven't seen it, you just got to go back and watch it. The other stuff will pertain to you now. But yeah, your takeaway having seen the drone footage of yourself edited to highlight you.
Yeah, no, I was stoked you guys did that podcast. I think that, that could always, like breaking down races, I think there's something to that. It'd be fun to get more of that. Of course, this one involved me, so it's a little different. But yeah, no, I mean, a lot of what you guys said, I fully agree. What's the real, what's the true answer of the rules and whatnot? If you're just coming from my perspective, it's a technical race, right? And if you're talking about technical racing, whether it's racing race cars or motorcycles, like BMX, whatever it is, there's never a point where you're never going to touch the other rider, right? If you're really trying to win. So rubbings races, we know that. Obviously, we don't want boards going through your legs. We don't want boards slamming on top of your deck and like purposely trying to take people out. But a technical course, I mean, the only way you're going to win is to slide in at the buoy, block the guy from the next buoy. Obviously, get a good start, get a good finish. So what's so fun and exciting about those races is anything can happen. So like a guy like me, could beat a Danny Ching maybe, if stuff goes wrong for Danny and I happen to have a perfect race, oh my God, I could finally beat Danny maybe. But in a long distance 10-mile race, I'm not beating Danny every time. So that's what's so cool about technical racing is the skills really come into play. I will admit, like Jake Graham, he's a faster paddler than me. We race all the time, and I'm literally right behind him every time. I think the first time we raced, I beat him. Ever since, he's beat me every time. So we have a fun, friendly rivalry going, right? And so it's killer. And going into that race, my skill set, I'm known for really good beach starts. I have all the technical skills because I'm a surfer, buoy turns and whatnot. I sprint pretty fast. But look, I'm not as fast as Jake. I'm not as fast as Danny. So I knew that if I had any chance to beat Jake was to get a good start. I did. I made it to the buoy. I did everything right. And then, sure, the longest stretch of the thing, would I like to be out in front of Jake where I didn't have to worry about it? Yes. But knowing that he's catching me, I'm like racking my head. I'm like, okay, what can I do? So I've seen it in many races. I mean, if you really look at races closely, many times the announcers don't talk about it, but there's blocking all through the race, every race you see. And so it was nothing malicious on my part. It was tactical, and when you see the drone, is it exaggerated more than I thought in my head? Of course it was. I mean, who paddles like 15 yards to the left? I didn't realize I was paddling that far over, so that's where it gets a little gray for people, right? Well, look at him. He's not even paddling down straight the course. Well, okay, I see that, but I didn't do that on purpose, to do that. I was literally just tactically racing. And, I mean, look, another 50 yards, he would have got me. You know what I mean? Like, he was right there. Yeah. But I will say this. The only time we ever hit boards was when Jake hit my board at the very end. So he hit my board, and of course, I had to take my paddle out of between our boards to go to the other side. So he's paddling this side, I'm paddling that side. So we're just like forcing each other to the finish. And that's where it got all, bangy. So I didn't bang him. It's impossible for the guy in front to bang the guy in back. You know what I mean? Like, you can't bang him. So that's my take. I won. I was stoked. He was pretty not stoked, and we had
Well,
some fun.
I
We had
didn't
some
help.
fun. Yeah, we had some
You
fun
did not
banter.
help.
We had some fun banter back and forth, and at the end of the day, I don't think he cares that much, and honestly, I don't either. It's just fun. It's another day at the races, and that's what it was. So I will add one more thing. So if we're talking about the crossover and blocking people, I would love for you guys to break down the 200-meter sprint final, because that's the heat I got screwed on, right? So, so little backstory in that, there's 8 rows of racers.
Yep.
We're all talking before. We're like, oh man, the guys. I can't remember if the tie was going out or in, but I remember the higher guys like were Bodie and I think like Paul Pianowski, a couple of those guys further out had the better lane, and like me, Jake, Danny had the low lanes. So we're like, oh man, we're screwed on this lanes. So we actually talked to everybody, and we shifted everybody a little further out, because I was like fully on the sandbar, and Jake pretty much was too, and Danny was kind of okay, but we all decided to kind of go like this. So we're all free. So I'm the first. I'm in lane 1. Jake's in lane 2. Danny's in lane 3. We all know we're all good paddlers. We can all paddle straight, right? So keep that in mind. So we get off the line. I'm head down sprinting. All of a sudden, Jake comes across me. This is like within 25 meters of the race, even. So I have to stop paddling. And then before you know it, I'm just behind here. I see Danny go like this. And so the whole time I'm like, man, Jake screwed me. And at the end of the cross of, just to give you an idea, at the finish line, Danny was the furthest one down. Then it was Jake, someone else, and I was 4th now. So all these people went like this across, me, and I ended up being 4th in the lane. When technically a 200-meter sprint, you're staying in your lane. So I was always like, kind of like, man, I can't believe Jake can't paddle straight. So I watched the replay, and if you watch it, Danny instantly off the line goes straight over here to Jake. So he paddled, and I don't know if it's tactical or what, savvy veteran move, but he went over here. So Jake had nothing to do but to get me. So that just caused this thing where these guys are going straight. So I had to go all the way across these, blah, blah, blah. So, so that's what happened to me.
I like it. That's some storytelling.
I do too. This is great.
The moral of the story, kids, is stay away from old men with board brands.
Well, I mean, the 200-meter, if you go to ICF or whatever, they're in actual lanes with buoys and all that stuff.
Sure.
So if anyone's complaining, it should be me, everyone crossing into my lane, So if we're in the 200-meter, but, that's how it is. But that's just another day of racing, and we chalk it up to what the hell happened. We have some fun. We have some of those non-alcoholic beers you guys have there, and that was good.
Oh, my God. Yeah, those things fueled the whole event. Yeah, Athletic Brewing,
good,
man. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, we of course know that like you and Jake are homies, and there's no issue there, but it's still like a fun example to mess around with.
Totally.
That like, okay, so saying what you just said about, let's go back to the technical before the sprint.
Yeah.
In this case, you've been around the race game for a long time, seen every extrapolation of every rule at this point or another and how it plays out in the real world. Let's say it's Dave Bainey, give us a rule on what this looks like. At what point is rubbing racing, and at what point does it become like, hey, that was impedance or whatever other words you want to use, right? To use your example of F1, yeah, you can bump cars or whatever, but you can't shove somebody into the wall. There are penalties that come with that, right? Obviously, greater catastrophes in that sport than ours, luckily. But yeah, where would you draw the line?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been on the other side where a board like fires right through my legs, right, at a buoy turn. And, I mean, that's completely impeding the guy in front of your thing, right? That's quite obvious. It's a tough one, though. We talk about it a lot. If I had to go off like what Anthony Vela, Anthony Vela is one of the predominant race directors in the biz. His rule is no boards through your legs. You can't slam your board on the tail. I've had that happen to me too, because like you're like making your buoy turn, and right when you like pop back up and about to take a sprint, a board will land on your thing, and you go over the bars. Like that's happened to me several times in the past. So you can't board through the legs, can't do the slam a board on the top. And he kind of has I think he calls it the right of way rule that even if you're on the outside, if you have a full half length board length ahead of the guy inside into a buoy, the inside can't just go straight and ram you. You have to like, kind of work together around it because he beat you to it. But if the inside guy's halfway, then you have the full right of way. You don't have to worry. It's up to them to not bump you,
Sure.
which makes sense to me. But when you got 10 guys going around buoy or something, it gets a little. You're like, okay, well, the fifth guy kind of went like this. It gets kind of tough. But I think the obvious ones like boards through the legs, boards on top of boards, full on collision T-bone. I mean, those are bad. All the other ones where it's kind of tactical, where you're like slowing down and kind of like making a move. And, a lot of guys will like go into a buoy, throw the brakes on, and like, guys fly by and the outside guy goes in. All that stuff's just so fun. It's so good. And it really takes a skill. It takes experience. It takes instinct, and that's all like part of it. And that's super cool. And that's what all the old me, Jake, Danny, it's so fun because we all know what we're all thinking. We're trying to figure out what they're doing. It's super fun. And that's what makes the racing fun. And that's why the technical racing is one of everyone's favorite races. So unfortunately, when you're on the bad side of it, sure, you get a little like, oh, well, what's the rule? And, I get it. But overall, I think it's kind of, I think there's got to be an element of that because that's what it is, a technical race. If you want to race straight in a line, let's race straight in a line. But it's just it's a different, it's just a different part of racing. So it is what
I love it.
Yeah. I'll close by saying it was entirely invisible to us from the beach, and I actually, no kidding, and I know you believe it too. No idea how far you're viewing the drone footage, and I watched that and went, oh my god, I wonder what I look like the bunch of times that I've done that myself, because it was probably even more of an acute angle. So it was a really great race. Then just so everyone knows what I was talking when I said I made it worse, we got to the beach and I was calling the race for the live stream, and Dave, you joined me, and I had just noticed Jake sort of like pinning his board on your rail like you were describing. That was sort of the part that caught our attention.
Yeah.
And Jake was aggrieved for everything that had happened before, and I was just going on and on about how he was a sneaky racer, tongue in cheek, but didn't help for a guy who was licking his wounds. Anyways, no, you guys have both been great about it. It was a lot of fun, and thanks for your insight on this. We got like USA SUP National Champ Gate Part 2 on this podcast. It's like a bonus version. All right, let's leave that behind. There was another, I'll say, bigger race. I'm very proud of the national championships. It was a pretty, Dave, I think you'd agree, it was a really cool event for first time out. Really well done. And by the way, kudos to Jake Graham. That tech course was perfection.
Yeah,
it was every single one of those races was fun because of that course layout, including that home stretch. So great job, Jake. Carolina Cup just happened. Not super sad. There wasn't a real live stream. Rob Sanoa did his best job from the beach, but there wasn't like the boat trailing. There were no drones. Huge bummer. Outcome probably could have been guessed at with the various talent that showed up. I mean, no surprise that Boothie won. Well, I'm curious for your take on the Carolina Cup. You weren't there this year. No Infinity team tent, I presume. Yeah, I saw some talk online and social media. Elite participation's gone down to some extent. It's still a really great race from the standpoint of the course. There's some great competitors there, but what's been your read on it? Because that used to be like the granddaddy of them all, particularly once the Salt Creek or the Pacific Paddle Games, went away. You're a muckety muck in our little world of SUP here. What's been your read?
Well, I mean, look, I think it's no secret the last maybe 2-3 years it's declined with attendance. Of course, the elite field has been declining pretty quickly down there with the top guys. I think the last one that it really had, big names was when Danny had that incredible comeback, or whatever, and Tommy Bidet got second. I think Teton was there, Boothie was there. Yep. I think even Shrimpy was there, and that was kind of the last one. And there's a few things going on. I mean, if you notice, like SUP racing in the USA is actually thriving. I mean, every race we go to, there's 100, 150 people. People are stoked. It's the next era of racing. You know, there's new fast guys. Um, people want to race. If you do notice, there's no new pros though. USA, there's not a lot of new pros coming up. I mean, if you're talking Soren Preston and Campbell Carter, they're the last of the young ones. You know, there's no kids coming up. So, you know, particularly in California, you know, we'll show up to a race. You know, there's gonna be a handful of pros. You know, like Danny, myself. You know, Riley Yagi, Soren, Candace, whoever it is, and we all know what the results are going to be just by showing up. It's going to be Danny. You know, I might get Riley once or twice. Riley gets me. You know, Jake comes up, he wins, and here comes Bodie. It's going to be Danny, Bodie, Jake. You know, Riley, Dave, and we know that's what it is. But it's us five. You know, there's no pros here anymore, or there's no guys coming from around the world to race these races, which they did in the past. So it's really going to be interesting because once Soren, you know, Soren's been 13 or 15, however old she is, for like 10 years now. But when she actually gets like, you know, Candace's age or whatever it is, and then Campbell is only 19, you know, once he's 25, I mean, there's no teens, there's no phenom kids coming up. But it's weird how the pro scene, like the open scene here, is thriving. 40s and 50s, there's never been more. Like, at least on California, it's great. The scene's insane. It's very competitive, and guys are stoked. But if you want to be a pro, it's really not about USA at the moment. You have to go. I mean, ICF's going to bring that back this year, which is huge for America. And hopefully that'll spark some guys to get fired up and inspire, and you know, that whole thing. But it's really shifted to Europe. You know, talking about team riders and stuff. You know, when we talk about the years and the calendar, what we're going to do. You know, traditionally we go to Carolina Cup. We're going to do Gorge. You know, we're going to do. You know, there's usually a couple others that'll have them come in for certain things. But you know, there's only limited budget, so it's like, okay, what am I going to get the most bang for my buck and most attention and most, you know, just marketing out of it, and where does it make sense? And it's honestly like, all right, well, this year let's do something different. You know, we're going to skip Carolina Cup, unfortunately. We're going to skip the Gorge, unfortunately, and they're all in Europe right now. And
yeah,
you know, what's great is the Eurotour is doing a great job. They're live streaming pretty much every event. They send out a link to high-res photos after every event for every athlete, every company. If you're on their email, you get the link to the album. And you know, they got the rating system and everything, and it just makes it easy. So I went off a little bit, but Carolina Cup, I think there's a few things. Was the American scene as pros is just not happening right now. I mean, the open divisions were still pretty good. Which I saw on Paddle Guru. I did check just to see what was going on. But I think there's also been, unfortunately, some controversy at that race, you know, the last few years, which turned off, you know, one year it turned off these guys, so they don't come the next year. And unfortunately, the next year it turned off these guys, and they didn't come this year. And yeah, and I think just a lack of communication, because I actually I did the live broadcast for that race a couple times. No one reached out to me, you know. I didn't hear anything about it, and I know Rob and Haywood, who are the locals there that always drive the boat for the thing, talking to them, no one reached out to them, and I think until the night before. And they're like, well, damn, like, I mean, I'm already back in Raleigh. It's 2 hours away, and I got to come back, you know, so it just couldn't happen, and that's unfortunate. So I think it's just a lack of some energy, really, and some communication, specifically for that race. But I will say that all the races that are thriving here, there's definitely a pattern happening. You know, even the popular races here, people don't want to like get worked paddling out through surf anymore, or like, you know, get worked on the way in. It's not that they don't want to do an ocean race, but guys are tired of getting blasted in the surf. You know, going. I got a phone call real quick. I should turn that off.
It was a cool little glitch.
What I noticed is like a race like Santa Monica, which is a really cool race here, and we usually get a bunch of participants. I talked to people who didn't do it. I'm like, dude, you done Santa Monica every year. Why didn't you do it? And they're seriously like, yeah, I don't want to go on the waves. I'm like, wow, you're like a 10-year veteran paddler. And I'm surprised you're kind of, yeah, I'm over it. I'll see you at Hano Hano, So it's like and I think Carolina Cup, honestly, it was like this prestigious thing. But truthfully, none of those guys want to do that race. Like they don't like, maybe Boothie likes that race, right? But no one really likes that race. Like if it was shorter, I think people would do it. A lot more people. It's just it's a gnarly race. Like you can't just show up and do that race. So it seems like the 5 to 8 mile, in the ocean or in flat water, if you don't get worked by waves, through a marina, seems like kind of the sweet spot for everyone. So I think it's got a few things. I think Carolina Cup has a chance to come back. Like say it like rebrands, right? And there's an old race that used to be out there called the Surf to Sound, which is the same course but it's half the length. If they just do that course and maybe a sprint race the next day for people who want to do it, like because they did do that sprint race in the past. I mean that's a rad weekend. I think something like that could attract people and kind of rebrand it, get more excitement again. I think the graveyard is just the graveyard, and it's rest in peace, bro. No one wants to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you. Like, it certainly is a demanding course, and I think I've gotten a lot of feedback from folks as well that the jump between the 10K on the harbor side, while maybe it's like a pretty rough 10K for a lot of folks who are inland lake paddlers or whatever, first time dealing with current and boat traffic and all that kind of stuff, still a huge jump from that race into the graveyard, not only distance wise, but then navigating a whole ocean leg and stuff. So there's something in between. Like, and I remember the Surf to Sound as well was kind of like the same start as the graveyard, but you finish on the back end. I think it ends up being like 8 miles or something like that. Way more digestible for folks than saying, okay, you're going to jump from a 10K into a 13-mile race. And oh, by the way, you got to finish in and out of the waves. And you've never done that because you live in Raleigh or whatever it is. Right. So totally agree. It's a lot to digest, but it's kind of sick.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what makes it the graveyard. It's famous. It's famous. And you win that thing, it's prestigious. Like, I get all that. I'm just, it's got to be something. I think a lot of it is like, just talking from a brand point of view, it's just for whatever reason, just hasn't, it's not enough bang for buck for me to like fly someone, fly Juliet from Brazil to get here to race, because like that, like you said, there's no stream, there's no photos, there's no nothing. And then on top, if I really want to do it right, I got to pay for my tent. I got to ship boards out there. It's just not sustainable. I think the smart events now are honestly like they're calling brands like myself, and they're like, hey, how can we get you out there? It's not like, hey, this is how much it is to be at our event, because they know if I show up, there's going to be 20, 30 of our network coming to the race, so they understand that, oh, if I could just let them put their tent up in the grass and get them stoked, then they're bringing their crew, right? So that's like the modern way to talk about getting the board companies there. It's like, hey, we have a race, we really want you there. How can we get you stoked? Can I get your tent for free? I know it's gonna be expensive to do this, so we're gonna throw you 3 entry, whatever it is. Like, it's more of a partnership instead of trying to get me to spend $1,000 to put my tent on the grass. It's just, by the time I fly people out there and get my boards there and drive there and everything, it's just, I'm not going to pay for my tent, It's just, I can't.
It's the difference between thinking about the brands as the customer instead of thinking about them as the product, essentially, right?
It's more of a revenue driver. Yeah, yep. It should be a partnership, and I get it. It's hard to like go to, San Francisco Subaru and ask for money for this paddle race. I get it. So where do you go to? The board companies, and in quick logic that makes sense. But we all know that without like the board guys being there, less people are going to be there. Unfortunately, and it's not like I'm playing hardball. It's just I only have a limited amount of money. So I need to go to the events that, are definitely like, more of a partnership and we get more out of it. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to be smart with my every single dollar I have. That's really what it comes down to.
Sure. Maybe pivoting to your point about Europe a little bit, like obviously the decline in Carolina attendance in part has something to do with like COVID was a big deal for the couple years. And then right out of COVID, Eurotour started having stuff on the same day. And that's what happened this year too, right? Where I think Eurotour had a race in, was it Austria, maybe, I think?
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
the Spanish long distance championships were on the same day also. So, you know, anybody who lives on that side of the world is probably going to go to one or of those two races. And to your point about like, you know, seeing a lot more growth in the sport over there, at least on the elite side, did that have any large or small amount to do with like you signing Arthur and guys like Donato in the last couple of years as well?
100%, 100%. Because, like I said, I'm not one of the big guys. Like a lot of people think my brand's like giant because we do a good job of getting out there. But I mean, I'm counting every single dollar, and I'm not kidding. And so I got to be really smart. And this was the first year, honestly, I really like took a big look at everything what an athlete is and what I'm paying for truly, right? And not like bagging on the athletes at all, just like, you know, what is their true worth? You know, and that's always like a big one because, you know, you don't get return of investment like instantly, right? It's always that thing like, what am I really getting out of this? So, like I said, I really try to be strategic to which events that I'm going to, that where I could get more bang for buck, more visibility. But yeah, like specifically, you know, having some guys in Europe was strategic. Yes, for sure, because that's where it's growing the quickest, and that's where I have least penetration. And you know, all my best riders are from the Latin countries, you know. And to be honest, we don't do that much business in the Latin countries. It's just really hard to do business down in like a country like Brazil. It's impossible, you know. And I get inquiries from Brazil and all those places all the time. But you know, we do have some partners in those areas like Argentina and Uruguay and things like that. But overall, it's a really small part of the market, you know. And there are some of the best paddlers in the world from there. So it does make sense to align yourself with great paddlers who could go anywhere and do really well. But as a business and selling boards, it doesn't make that much sense. So then you start looking at, you know, I've never really like, okay, let's break down how their social is, you know? And unfortunately, if you're an athlete and you suck at social, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like it's, you have to be good at social now. You have to, because that's kind of like some of your main worth, you know, is that because you're not going to win a race every weekend. So how good is your following? How good are you at actually talking to your following and, you know, being your own kind of marketing, you know, house in a way. But yeah, it's weird. I really like looked at athletes this year because, you know, budgets did get smaller. I mean, I'm sure you probably heard that from everybody. You know, pre-books were down. Business is still healthy, but like people aren't spending as freely. They're being more cautious. So you know, naturally I have to be more cautious as well. So, you know, budgets got a little tighter and we got to be more smart and really think about it. So to get someone like Donato, who I've been watching for a long time, and he's still young and he's fired up and he's literally just starting his journey. I mean, these guys usually go hard for 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, I love it. He's already been crushing it. So yes, that's specifically to help with that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and Donato is quite young. How old is he? Like 19, 20,
He's
something like that?
19. He's a big boy too. I think he might.
He's huge.
He's like maybe 6'4", 6'2", 6'4". But he wants it, man, and he's dedicated. And I mean, the way he races is just different. You know what I mean? Like he's just. I love watching.
Just rugby player, right?
He's a beast. Yeah.
Yeah, he played rugby, didn't he? Coming into as a youth.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not sure. I know he's dude. He's a really smart. I mean, he might have. He's a big boy, but I know he's really smart. He's really into his training, and you know, he's really into like board design and just a really polite, like got his head on strong, and he's focused. You know, he's a pretty cool kid.
That's really rad.
That's super. Well, speaking of, that's a good segue. Board design. You've got the new one, the Ever Ready. I have not touched one yet. Ethan Huff, who just moved here to Pacific Northwest,
Yeah,
I think he's got one coming. So he's promised to trot it out, and we can all give it a little lick. But yeah, tell us about, like, it's a big. Listen, you've got between the Whiplash and the Blackfish. We see the poster behind you. You've got a couple of iconic boards there. So kind of exciting to see you have a new board from whole cloth. Tell us about it.
Yeah, no, for sure, and appreciate you asking. Yeah, it's like the Blackfish. We had a flat version, which is like the traditional classic Blackfish, and then obviously when dugouts started becoming more popular, we added the dugout version, and literally it was the same exact board, just thicker, so you could decrease the cockpit and the standing zone. But once we started redesigning this new dugout board, it quickly became in my head, this isn't a Blackfish at all. I can't call it just a Blackfish dugout. So we made the choice to discontinue the dugout version of the Blackfish, even though it was our best seller last year. Most people don't do that, but it just didn't make sense. So like Blackfish sticks in its lane as a flat deck, and this takes over our all water, all around dugout board. And and that's just really what it was the Blackfish dugout was easy to design because, like I said, it was the same exact board, just a sunken cockpit. This one is way different. It's completely different. So it was really fun because it was the first like all water board that I've designed from the ground up in a long time, and it took over 2 years and over 9 prototypes. When it was all said and done, maybe 10, but it was really cool because you always see Starboard with their videos and they got like 12 prototypes and they're like using it and I'm always like, damn, how do they do that? That's so expensive. So, that's why it takes me 2 years, is because like I got to make one, then I make 2 more, and then I make one. But what I did this time was I made 5 out in Vietnam where our factory's located. And then we went to Vietnam and tested them. So I got to test 5 different versions all at once, and I brought Arthur Rukin with me, and we just knocked it out. I mean, we paddled every day. We were like kids in school. We had our notebooks out. We were watching video. It was just really cool. And the funny thing was none of those made the cut. It was basically a combination of 2 of them that made the final one, basically. And that's the one you saw competing last weekend for the first time in Italy on the Eurotour, and those guys got that board a week before the race, so they'd really been on it like a couple of days before. So I was like, I don't even know if they're going to race it, right? Because how can you be all that used to a board? But they all raced the Ever Ready, and Donato got second. Marie Carmen from Puerto Rico got first on it in the women's, and then Juliette Duhame got third on it. So we got like full-on podiums with the board, and the feedback's been insane. Really positive, because none of those guys ever tested the board. It was just me and Arthur pretty much. So to have, like, I was nervous, so for them to like be stoked, put it in play and do well, I mean, that says a lot. It really does. And as a board designer, there's a lot of pressure off my body after this weekend. So I can't wait till they get here. So we get them here in the USA in about a week, and like you said, Ethan should get them maybe 2 weeks from now. So
cool.
Nice.
What? Go ahead,
can I ask a
Matt.
nerd question here?
Yeah.
What things performance-wise were you trying to fill the gap on from the Blackfish dugout that made you come up with this whole new design and say like, all right, well, this just isn't a Blackfish anymore?
Yeah.
Like, what performance metrics were you trying to get it to do that maybe the dugout wasn't doing before?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think I think like the Blackfish dugout, and I would say even a couple other brands dugouts, like they weren't truly like all in on the dugout, right? They're kind of like friendly dugouts where they're deep, but they're not that deep. You know what I mean? And admittedly so, like, I was just kind of scared, because people get intimidated by a dugout until they really get used to it. So I was, I could have been a little scared that maybe it wouldn't sell or people wouldn't be stoked. But more and more I wrote it, and everybody wrote it, like, it just made more sense. You're like, dude, we're not getting the full benefits of a true dugout unless you just go for it, So it's, I mean, it's almost twice as deep as the Blackfish dugout. So that was one, because the dugout really does help in the chop upwind. You're able to you don't have to move around in the board as much, like downwind and stuff. You can stay more in the sweet spot, which helps a lot. Obviously, you have drainage issues if you're going in and out of surf, but you can still do a nice beach start on them if you have the two handles on there. You can still technically, buoy turn them. It's just more of an advantage in choppy stuff. And specifically for this board, we really wanted to work on keeping momentum and glide, like specifically upwind. As you know, most races are never glassy. Even the quote unquote glassy races, and if you're doing a distance race, half the race is directly in the wind, half the race is not. So that's where you burn out your shoulders, and that's where the guys really start feeling it. So that was specifically something we worked on. And then just trying to make the board feel lighter overall. We just always complain how like it just feels heavy on the shoulders, or like after a certain amount of time on a board just feels heavy on the shoulders. And how can we just feel fresher longer, with the race? So of course, and all that, we're always trying to make it faster and be stable and everything that comes with that. But those were the main things, was like efficiency upwind. How can we just make it feel lighter on the body throughout the whole race, and and not wear out the legs. And that's where the dugout happens. You sit low in the water. You have all that stability up on the rail. I mean, you'll fall out of the board before the board flips over. You know what I mean? That's how much the dugout really works. So you just got to get used to it and trust the board, and the design of the nose and the outline and everything will do it for you. Like even myself, I get caught up. Like I want to step back on a big bump, but I'll force myself to stay there. And you're like, there, it just does it. So yeah, it's cool. And we always go to the extreme. So like the first ones, we could stand on them, but bro, we're not, those things are so tippy, then, okay, how can we dial it back? This thing's fast. How can we dial it back? So it's always tweaking a couple things and doing stuff like that. So it's a long, fun process, but it's endless too. So you got to pick a lane, and we did. And I felt this board, to me, like the word I kept coming up with, just like, there's something special about it. Like it's cool. You paddle and you're like, wow, this is a cool, fun board to paddle. So I think we nailed it. I'm pretty proud about it.
Awesome. Yeah, can't wait to stand on one at some point and give it a whirl. It sounds awesome.
I'd love for you to try it and let me know what you think.
Hopefully so.
Any different construction elements on it this time around? Does it just look pretty in your pictures, or is it painted?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Because obviously we're kind of known for the brushed carbon look. We were one of the first brands to kind of do that, only because it kind of carried over from our custom boards, and we just did it into production just for the look. And sure, it shaves a little bit of weight and whatnot, but just because we've always had the brushed carbon, I just thought a nice clean was just fun and different for once. Just a cool evolution, right? So we did a little like matte body with like some gloss highlights, which really gives it a premium kind of look, like race car. They look cool. And that's another thing we worked on a long time. So it was cool.
They do look cool. I think you had one of the early prototypes at Hood River this past year, and I was standing kind of poking at it in the grass with Jim Terrell for a minute.
Yeah. Like, there you go.
This looks pretty jazzy, man.
Yeah,
it looked very cool.
Fun. And I did any designing or branding kind of fun stuff. That's I can do that all day. So yeah, it's fun.
You're good at it, awesome, man.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, one other question on the construction front is, you have the whiplash as a hollow option. Does this board come in a hollow option? And if not, why, from a designer's standpoint, would you offer some models in hollow but not others, I guess?
Yeah. Well, first, the hollow construction, obviously a couple of years ago, hollow was like a buzzword, right? So we're all jumping on it, and we're all curious, and we're all stoked. And it does have benefits. Me personally, I feel it's very nice for flat water boards, just because it kind of has more of a cork to it. It's not necessarily, it's weird. They're not super lighter than traditional carbon foam glass. They are lighter, but not like people think you're just going to pick it up and throw it around. They're not. but they do feel lighter on the water when you paddle them. And then when you're really sprinting, like, you know, out of the hole or something, it has like more of a corky. It comes out faster, so it does sprint really nice. Like if we were ever going to make like a specific 200-meter sprint board, I think a hollow one would be really nice. Um, Also, we've tried it in downwind boards, and it's really nice in downwind boards. You know, with the energy coming from behind you, really good as well. We have tried it in all around boards in and out of surf, and it's just there's not enough mass there where it kind of like, you know, you hit the wave and it just kind of takes it too much. And to be honest, I don't think it's strong enough. I think people would end up breaking them a lot in for an all
Hmm.
around board. So we might do a downwind board and hollow. That's something I'm considering, but truthfully, I mean the carbon stuff is so light already. Like, I mean, guys at ICF were having to put weights on their board, you know, to make them heavier. To where, I mean, I don't know. I think the hollow, there is a place for it, but the traditional standard layup, it's so stiff and so light already. And I still prefer the regular construction. So the Ever Ready being an all around board, yes, we did go regular construction. So it's a full carbon PVC molded, you know, sandwich board.
Cool.
What are you seeing? No doubt you look at, you know, Starboard and NSP and Flying Fish, and you know, there seems to be a slow, it's not fast, but a slow convergence on something approaching like the roughly right all water model. There's obviously all sorts of tweaks. One SUP tends to have like always like a crazy sort of like tail or something that sort of throws it, you know, them off in a separate category, which is cool and it's fun to have that. But like, do you see some kind of like general agreement, or in your view, are like these boards all like super different when you look at like an all water board?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at boards like side to side, and I think any designer would tell you the same thing, they are pretty different, but at the same time, you know, there's always going to be, if you've been making boards long enough, like, you know what stuff does now. So it's a matter of, you know, how can you synchronize all those things? Um, you know, I'm always trying to have like the marriage between the rocker and like where I want the water to release, where I'm placing the fin. Um, you know, for me, I'm thinking more like rocker and outline and stuff. The bottom, I don't really have to guess anymore. You know, we've done everything. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I've been, like my dad made a race board in 2004. You know what I'm saying? So like we freaking done it all. So it's just a matter of like, how can you do what combination is the best for what you're trying to achieve in this board. You know, the trend lately is actually going to more simple bottoms, you know, like no concaves, you know, rounded rail, soft rails. um, you know, because we figured out how to make boards more stable through the outline, you know, through the rockers and the shape of the rails. You know, I still like a concave in my board personally, but you know, it's tough too because you know like I think, and I don't even think it's in a bad way, but you know, Starboard's so big and so visible, they really do kind of influence the whole industry, you know. So they have so many good team riders that win all the time, and so it's natural that your team rider is going to be like, well, hey, you know, look at the All Star, you know, it keeps kicking my, you know, whatever it is, and so you can get trapped into what team riders want all the time, and that's something I try to not do because I feel we have enough pedigree to where, you know, I know what I'm doing, but you have to look at what everybody's doing because that's what it is. And sure, I get influenced by everybody, and I try every board I can. I'm fans of everybody, you know, like there's a lot of great boards out there. So um, I'm just trying to build the best board I can that I love and that I want to ride, and hopefully other people want to ride it as well. You know, of course, with the blessings of the team riders and getting their feedback and all that stuff. But um, yeah, it's fun. It's ever evolving, man, and it's endless. I mean, you could do any combination of bottom rail, whatever it is, and I mean, you just never know, you know what it does. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, speaking of endless, we could go on. Matt and I specifically could go on about this probably for the rest of the night.
I got 10 more questions loaded on just board stuff, but we can. Yeah.
You got a burning one you got to get off your chest before we move to.
No, we can keep going. We can keep going. That's all right.
You're like, 6 ounce carbon pre-preg or okay.
Yeah.
Question for you. Matt and I were having a vibrant text debate. I want to throw, this is just wild card. I want to throw a race format by you. So, Matt, I don't want to speak for you entirely, but I know that you and I both got ensconced in bike racing over the last couple of years, just watching it. And Dave, I don't know if you've caught on to this, but like road bike racing is essentially SUP distance racing. The tactics and all that kind of stuff. Like the draft, it's nuts. Like the drafting is like you get more than bike length away, and like you're screwed. Yeah, that kind of thing. It's okay. Bike races have really team efforts, right? You know, there's always like the leader, whether it's Lance Armstrong or whoever, but there's like the one guy that the team is trying to get to the finish line, and you've got the domestiques, right? The servants who are trying to deliver them there. Had this concept because one of the things we've seen, and Boothie is a great example where he just blows everybody up at the beginning of the Carolina Cup, and everyone's like, well, screw that. I'm not going to wreck my race trying to haul him back for everybody else. Now it's a race for second. And it goes from there. But this idea of you take, 4-person teams and over like, let's call it like a 30K or maybe more race course, and say whoever, the rankings are whoever gets an individual over first. So if Infinity gets the first person over, even if everyone else finishes 30 minutes later, Infinity wins the race, or so on and so forth. Thoughts about that? Because I think that SUP distance racing, we've seen these races and it just gets blown open, and sometimes it's not even close between even the podium spots. I mean, I think this year the Carolina Cup was not really much of a drag race anywhere. So the idea of maybe the sport featuring more of a team dynamic, and I know our buddy Chris Parker, certainly kind of loved this, and he was early on the bike racing comparison bandwagon. But what are your thoughts on alternate formats for distance racings and that kind of thing? Would you like to see a sort of a team kind of event?
Yeah, I think the team would be super cool. Yeah, I mean, like you said, the distance racing has been distance racing for so long, and especially for a spectator, if you're at the beach, if you're a parent or whoever it is, obviously, they go away and they come back. So unless you have a live feed, you're not watching anything. So that's what was always cool about 200-meter sprint or the surf race or whatever. It's right there in front of your eyes. So something to, mix it up and just kind of get more team, like where people are more invested in it. Could be pretty cool. Like, it's like it'd be interesting. Like, I know what you're saying. It's funny because it kind of happened. I remember like back in the day, it used to happen. You'd be like, oh, the Husulio brothers are racing together, and they would definitely like mess with you by themselves, right? And then, when there's like a strong crew from Australia would show up, and like all the Aussies are drafting together, and so that kind of happens a little bit, but not as much because there's not as big as groups of guys from countries. But I think it could be cool for sure. And I like the idea, like back in the day, there was a race, like a relay race where, you have, however long the course is. I mean, we do have relay races, but they're more sprint things. But, if it was more of like a distance relay race where you had to like strategically place guys, like, in the positions to stay with everybody. And I even like the idea of like kind of Ironman-y, like say like you gotta paddle, whatever it is, a mile, then you got to road bike 5 miles, and then run 1 mile or whatever it was. There's like a couple concepts like that in the early years, which was kind of rad, And there used to be Brody Welty with PaddleFit was trying to launch PaddleFit games back in the day, and we did a few of those events down here in San Diego, and those were cool because it would like mesh CrossFit guys with paddlers, and it was so cool because I mean, obviously the paddle events, we would just smoke these like buff like crazy guys, and then there'd be like the rope pull thing, and we would be competitive, right? Because we were like in shape, but like they would win, so it kind of evened out. But it's like, man, if you had like old school Slater Trout in one of those things, like he'd be like world champ, he'd do them both. So something like that.
This is why you got Donato.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's room for something like that for sure. And I like the idea as well of just like a surf race tour, where it's just little surf race heats. I think that'd be insane. I mean, there's so many ideas, and unfortunately, all the ideas just take money, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's where do you see projecting forward like 5 years, which is a lifetime in this sport? Where do you see things? Pick your topic, pick your zone. I'm just curious, like what jumps to mind.
Yeah, it's interesting because as a brand, I'm one of the brands that sells quite a few SUP surfboards, and I think in general people don't think SUP surfing is happening. You know what I mean? And definitely at a pro level, it's really hurting. You know, you got the ISAs, you know, but they're not even going to have it this year, I guess, in Denmark, and the APP doesn't really, you know, you never really know what's going to happen there. So, but there's a lot of people SUP surfing. So I don't know if that's ever going to be like a thing, but I do see people stoked on, like even the Carolina Pro Am. I mean, dude, there's a lot of people in that event. You'd be surprised. And same thing though, there's not a lot of pros, but it's a lot of these guys that just want to go out and hang out with bros and surf a heat and not really, you know, care that much. So I'd like to see surfing, you know, just those kind of events come back. But I think 5 years, I think the race thing's still going to happen in Europe. I think it's just starting there, man. I think it's going to get more and more important as an industry out there for racing specifically. Um, and I feel like ICF is kind of really, you know, ISA is doing their thing, but ICF feels like, you know, it kind of feels like the most important races now, you know. So I think ICF is going to be continue to get more important, and we'll see. It's tough. I'm just talking from a, you know, pro lens, but you know, as a market lens, I feel like, I mean, people are still buying race boards. People are still buying SUP surfboards. Thank God I don't make any inflatables because that seems really tough. Um, so yeah, it's just interesting, man. It's interesting. It's always changing, and I think the biggest thing is, you know, who knows what's going to happen with the economy here, right? People are still buying stuff, fortunately now, but you could definitely tell people are a little more leery, right, or thinking about it a lot harder than they were. So um, yeah, I think the race thing's coming, and it's going to come more, and hopefully that sparks more Olympic stuff and all that kind of stuff.
The Olympics. I might poke you on this for a sec. We go up and back about this all the time, and there's a lot of polarizing opinions about the sport and the influence of the Olympics on it. Where do you lie on this? Is it a good thing for the sport? Is it a bad thing for the sport? If it is part of the sport, what does it look like there, and how does it kind of trickle down from there to everybody else? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just like you. I don't have any of the answers, but I mean,
No, I know we're putting you on the spot. You're
yeah,
just making you
no,
spitball.
I mean,
Nothing.
look, I'm a
Yeah,
fan of the Olympics, right? I mean, I'm an old fart, and I had dreams of being in the Olympics at one point on a SUP. You know, I'm like, man, if this happens, I have a shot. You know, and I don't see how it can be bad for the sport. You know, I really don't. If it doesn't make it, I don't think it's bad either. But if it gets in there, I think it could only be good. What, you know, why not? The hardest part would be, you know, who decides what discipline it is, and you know, all that stuff. And I think a lot of people would think it's going to be that 200-meter sprint, you know, like a sprint canoe style in the lanes. And then it starts bringing up all the questions. Okay, do you make it? Do you limit the board? Do you limit the construction? Is it a single design? And then, you know, then it gets like, that's where I don't like where it could go, you know, because then it limits, you know, design and character of each brand and all that stuff. But and then you're like, okay, how about a surf race then? But then, you know, you have the guys who don't go into surf that don't want to do it, and so it's an endless. I mean, I don't want that job, but I do feel there's a place for it. You know, surfing and longboarding is making it, and I don't see how it could hurt. I'm a fan of it, and I know a lot of these people have dreams to be in the Olympics. I mean, really, that's in their head. That's probably a lot of their end goal, right? I mean, they're committed to this something to hopefully have a chance to get in the Olympics, because at the end of the day, I mean, it's just racing. You know, there's no end goal for SUP at the moment. You know, if you're like a pro. Um, so yeah, I like the idea of it. And I mean, I would love to see a 200-meter sprint. I do like that format, and I do like the surf race format. So those would be the two I would vote for, if you had to pick a couple. So yeah, that's my take.
all right. You heard it
Hey,
here,
Dave.
folks.
Yeah. Final maybe thoughts from you. Then we'll let you go. What are the summer plans for Infinity for you? What are you looking forward to? I think you mentioned some of the races you're traveling to. I assume we'll see you in the Gorge, perhaps.
Yeah. So obviously we do surfboards and SUP. So through summer I have surf events I go to and whatnot. But yeah, unfortunately for the Gorge, which is my favorite event of the year, San Clemente Ocean Fest came back this year. It's the same weekend. So just logically, it's in our backyard.
Yep.
We can do a fun race that we love here, and it's.
Yeah, I mean,
was that San Clemente calling you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So unfortunately, we're going to skip the Gorge, but we're going to have a nice, fun race here in town. But I'm heading to Europe. Hopefully, going to go to the APP Korea, Busan. That's always a good event because it's kind of like a standalone event in a way with Korea, and we have a new distributor out there, so it'd be great to spend some time with him and support him. I'm hoping to go to ISAs in Denmark. I'll be in Florida for ICF, and then just trying to plug a couple in between when I can. But those are the big ones I'll be going to. So,
nice. I mean, that sounds like a busy summer right there. That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
man.
yeah, it's busy for sure. So, what about you guys? What events do you guys got? Because you're not both up in Oregon, right?
No,
Not anymore.
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'd like to get up to Oregon at some point.
I'm actually in Seattle. I used to live in Portland, but no, it's in. You're not wrong for getting everyone can. I mean, Hood River is the center of the Pacific Northwest universe. No, I mean we're gonna stay busy. We just actually we got to get you up here sometime, Dave, to Seattle just for some Grands, or if you're ever up here, because there's a race every week all year long.
Yeah,
not two races. We've got some local ones we run in Seattle, and so our it's Mondays, Wednesdays, every Monday and Wednesday. Well, Wednesdays start a little bit later, but every Urban Surf. I don't know if you know those guys. I'm not sure if they distribute you or not.
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to get up there. We're going to be working with Ethan a little bit more this year, so hopefully maybe that'll lead me up there this year at one point.
Nice. Yeah, good to get up here and cool off in the summer, but tons of racing, and then we've got the USA SUP National Championships.
Yep.
Actually, pretty close proximity to. Matt, do you remember the exact date? It's the Olukai Low Country Boil,
I think
essentially.
it's September 20 something.
Yeah. So that'll be a good closeout for the summer racing series. But Dave, I couldn't agree with you more. Racing, it's like for all the people that have moved away, like Matt from Seattle, they've been like replaced. You can't replace Matt, obviously, but they've been belly buttons have been replaced, like at a 2-to-1 rate. Like it's just there's more paddlers here. And if you said, oh, here's all the people 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that have moved away or stopped doing the sport, it's like a 2-to-1 ratio of people who have replaced them. It's just growing.
Right.
So yeah, it's exciting to see.
Yeah, it's thriving for sure. At least in SoCal, we've got a ton of races going on, and there's at least 100 people there each one. So it's been fun.
Yeah, I want you guys to keep that the Alamitos Bay Yacht Club race, that distance race. We got to keep that one alive that USA SUP did for the distance race there. That place was. You missed the distance race, didn't you? Because you had to do some kid stuff.
Yes, I couldn't come to day 2, but that you guys did a good live feed, so I got to watch most of it, and yeah, it looked really cool.
Yeah, it was sick. It was a really good spot. Okay, hey Dave, listen. Speaking of kid stuff and races and Infinity, you've got plenty on your plate. We'll let you rip here.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. That was fun. Anytime. Let's maybe we circle back again later on in the year. Check back in.
Would love to. That sounds great.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you guys soon.
See ya.
Thanks,
all right,
Dave.
Take care. Bye, everybody.